TerraSkin paper is really suited for water media and for ink application, and in this case I'm going to be painting more watercolor effect contra the one I did previously, which was much more opaque. So here it's going to be mostly watercolor, just transparent watercolor and India ink. I'm applying a little bit of water on the surface of TerraSkin paper, but not much, because it does not absorb a lot, and also it doesn't absorb it fast enough. So if you apply too much water, what will happen is it'll float around and it'll be very unstable image. Now I'm going to paint floral forms, not any particular flower, nothing realistic, but floral forms, and cause certain effects that I really like. For that, I'm using granulation medium, Winsor & Newton product, which is used to enhance granulation of particles of watercolor pigment into the wash. Here is a little bit of red. I want to use some red for these flowers, and so I use very little paint in the beginning, make a very soft kind of looking wash here. And then transit over the page from one end to the other to create a interesting composition, and then suspend some more paint into it later. So here I can use sort of glazing as you would use in regular watercolor technique, but I'm painting now just wet in wet. Okay, and I'm going to use some nice yellow. I'm going to use something like Indian yellow to put in here, and move that around the page, and a little bit of green. I'll use Winsor green, and then I will mix that with my yellow to create a little bit softer effect in it, in the wash. So right now it's all kind of very loose. And here I want a little bit more intensity. Okay, and now enhance the reds. So I'm going to use a lot of paint, So here I am using, as you can see, a lot of paint on the brush, and I'm going to suspend it into my wash here. To create this floral form. I love drips and spatter, and that's why I'm going to put this in here. And also, when you have granulation medium, you can quite nicely use some of the spritz of water to create some nice granulating effect. And here I'm going to just do that very quickly, just plain water. And now create a little bit darker value of red, just for, and mix it with a bit of green and a bit of darker red in order to create a little bit of a value change here. So I hope you can see this well. What I'm doing here is just creating change as pretending that this is some kind of real image, but it is not. As you can see, I'm doing this more or less just haphazardly on this page in order to, okay, here. And there. I'll wash my brush and use some ink in order to move this paint around, and then I'll spritz the gain. So here we go. I'll do the maybe center. And I have no real control as to how is this ink going to go. I do have some experience with putting it on, so you know, a little bit of ink goes a long way. So I'm doing this here. So here I'll put in a bit more, and the same thing goes with the leaves. I'll just kind of put in some into the leaves and connect the whole thing in some way. Because connection of these elements of design is very important. So here, very loose floral form. Okay, now I'm going to do a bit of here as if this was some kind of a vase, maybe a glass one. And I can, at any time, I can add more color, or you know, so say for example here, I could add a little bit more green if I wanted to. So for example, a little bit darker green. Maybe here a little bit more intense green, and I can always add a bit of opacity with it. Okay. Now I can take a scrape, take some of this texture, for example, and create some textural effects in this, because I have enough paint to lift off certain things. So I can lift off by using a bit of textural material like this and pressing it with roller into an area. Now I'm looking for area that is a little bit drier at this moment in order to be able to produce an effect. So here it is. I'm going to lift. This texture is there. It's quite dry. And I can transfer the wetness of that down here and create some interesting effects. And here we are with a new composition in more transparent color, but also with some interesting textural effects caused in it by applying texture with other physical elements into it. And also, if you have a look at this area in here, there are some really beautiful effects created by flow of ink into the paint and the other way around. And this is something that is a little bit haphazardly done, because you cannot control it a lot, but you can see that later on that if you put a little bit more ink, it is a bit better because the ink stays darker. If you put a very little ink, it'll mix with paint and it'll be gray, and that doesn't work very well with the flowers in particular, because then it looks dead. But in this case, I think you can see what I mean. It is just an experiment to show what is possible. And you see some of the areas are already dry, some of the areas are still wet, and it'll take probably another hour or more for this to dry, which probably would be dry on watercolor paper in a shorter time. but then you would not have the same kind of effects, because this is very slick surface, it is very tough surface. I can take say a brush here and scratch in here, and the scratch will create a light, where in, say for example here, okay, where in the watercolor paper it would create dark. So this is very, very different than watercolor paper. So here I can produce lines for leaves or something like that. Here you see I can produce these lines quite nicely, and it can go down to white, as you can see here, rather than going down into dark on watercolor paper. It is a wonderful paper to use, so I hope that you will use some TerraSkin paper and experiment on it. Thank you.